Joining us now, Vice Chair of the House Armed Services Committee, Democratic Congressman Anthony Brown of Maryland. Also with us, columnist and Deputy Editorial Page Editor at The Washington Post, Ruth Marcus. Good to have you both. Congressman, I take it you won't be clapping if the president talks about the troops he's sending to the border to get ready for the caravan.
I'll be very disappointed. I mean, last week, the House Armed Services Committee had a hearing. Senior defense officials came in, laid out their strategy, or really, quite frankly, a lack of a strategy, assured us that 2,300 was the number for active duty. I think that's too high to begin with, and literally hours later announcing several thousand more, probably bring that number closer.
2,300 active duty at the border?
2,300 active duty, 2,100
Doing
National
what?
Guard, laying concertina wire. I mean,
how long does it take to lay barbed wire? They've been doing that since before Thanksgiving.
Right. So you had 5,900 back in November. They laid concertina wire.
Right.
They took about, 3,000 home, and now they're back laying more wire. This is not what men and women on active duty sign up for. They don't need to be on the border doing that. Keep in mind there are 3,000 vacancies at the Customs and Border Protection Agency today. Quite frankly, fill those positions, let them do the border mission, let our active duty troops do what they train to do, which is to fight real threats either in Syria, Afghanistan, Korea, or wherever those real threats may be.
Now, Ruth, what should we be expecting tonight from the President at the State of the Union address?
He will offer words of calm and unity, and Democrats will take him at his word, and the whole country will get together and cheer.
Amen. Thank you.
Come on.
I was like, Ruth, what happened to you?
Positive look forward.
Look, offering an olive branch is better than not offering an olive branch, okay? So words of,
open mind.
Words of unity are better than words of division, but you have to put a lot of grains of salt on that olive branch after 2 years, and after a shutdown and in the face of the potential for an emergency declaration, all words, as Eliza Doolittle said.
Well,
and a lot of, I was just going to say, and a lot of broken promises.
Well, the emergency declaration would be to deal with the crisis, and I mean, I've heard him say several times publicly, we got 2 caravans and there's another one coming. What are the 2 we got? How did our U.S. military do that? What is he talking about?
Again, Casey.
What is he talking about?
And that's the point I was trying to make last block. How do you negotiate with somebody who makes up facts
literally spewing
out of thin air? Which, if you're Nancy Pelosi, first of all, you've tried to negotiate with this guy before, and he's always moved the goalposts. He's always changed what he's required at the last minute when you did finally sit down and talk to him. And now his arguments actually aren't based in fact at all. So if you're Speaker of the House and you've got a $22 trillion national debt, you're really going to give $6 billion away? So he has a punchline at a campaign event that's not attached to reality?
It's just not possible.
You can't do that.
And
that's too irresponsible.
The issue, too, is where there are actually facts on the ground, they are very often created by the president's and this administration's own policies. Congressman, what is the solution? Because I know Democrats have wrestled with sending more judges to try and adjudicate these asylum cases, potentially, more beds for them. But that's tricky, right? Only because that means you're embracing their policy of housing all of these people instead of allowing them to come into the country as they fight these cases.
Look, the challenge, and I won't even call it a crisis on the ground at the border, has been created by the administration. You've got number one, and we've a lot of coverage on this, the separation of families, and then number 2, forcing asylum seekers to seek asylum from Mexico and not enter the United States. That creates some real challenges. So yes, you need more asylum judges to adjudicate these cases quickly, and I should add that violates probably international law and U.S. law. But you also need to ensure that there's humanitarian assistance there. These caravans are not threats. These are tired people who are hungry. hungry,
Right.
they're fearful, they're fleeing violence and persecution. So the crisis is created by the administration, and the kinds of support you need there is not active duty military, but you need humanitarian aid to a crisis that the president has created.
Congressman, as you know, yesterday the Senate voted 70 to 26 in a rebuke of President Trump, saying effectively it's a bad idea to withdraw our troops from Syria and Afghanistan at this point. As someone who fought in Iraq yourself, earned a Bronze Star in the United States Army, you're an authority on this subject. You know what you're talking about. Should we be pulling out in some way? I mean, there are a lot of people who look at this and they say, man, we're 18 years almost into this war in Afghanistan. When is the right time to leave?
Well, certainly on Syria, I think the consensus is, and I support our maintaining a presence there, about 2,000 soldiers. ISIS is not defeated, while the physical caliphate has been shrunk. It's an ideology. We're going to hear later this week the National Counterterrorism Strategy was released in October. It recognized that terrorism is persistent. So a precipitous withdrawal, it exposes our troops to risk, it abandons our allies and partners in Syria, and it just gives Russia an opportunity to run rampant in Syria.
So how will you know, Congressman, it's time to leave? Because most people don't want to be in these countries forever and have men and women like yourself in the line of fire.
Yeah, look, it's condition-based, and that's what this administration has said. It's not time-based. And when the conditions suggest that the breeding ground for ISIS no longer exists, and that as an ideology they cannot flourish, then that's the time to leave. Remember, our presence there isn't for direct action. It's to train, advise, and assist our partners on the ground, and that's true whether it's in Syria, Afghanistan, West Africa, East Africa. It's to support our partners and allies on the ground so that they can do the fighting necessary to defeat that extremist violent threat.
Ruth, I wonder what your thoughts are on the Democratic response. I heard the Congressman talking about the separations. I wonder if this is an opportunity for the Democrats to talk about some of the key issues that have really plagued this presidency and disappointed many in terms of what it means to be an American, but also for it to be nimble and to respond, because one of the issues with this presidency is keeping Americans informed of what is fact and what is fiction.
I think the Democratic response is going to be more interesting than the usual response to a
they're
president.
Tough. All the responses are always tough. Wrong cameras,
wrong cameras.
Not
there was
just
something
Democrats.
with that water. I don't really remember what that was.
It's hard. I mean, it's a really hard thing.
But what a contrast to choose Stacey Abrams, right? An African-American woman, and a non-Washington person, completely different face of the party. So doesn't have to sort of to the Democratic congressional tension that's going to exist with this administration and with their Republican friends in the Senate, but can maybe pull the lens back and talk a little bit about the broader challenges facing the country.
But also respond, because if he riffs, chances are there might be something to fact check or to push back on in real time, not to have something prepared eight hours earlier. You can't do that with Trump.
I'm going to bet against a Trump riff, and I'm going to bet against a Stacey Abrams riff.
I wouldn't.
But I'll be back tomorrow morning. You can tell me how dumb I am.
I do wonder who's advising Bernie Sanders, the guy who had trouble with black voters last year, and a guy who has now decided that he is going to try to crowd out Stacey Abrams and also.
Well, he's doing it at a different time. So, yes, no, the best argument for Bernie Sanders on this is he's done it before, so he does it to everybody. His goal is not being Mr. Popularity. It's getting the attention that he needs for whatever his plans are.
All right, before we go, as we continue to cover Black History Month, Congressman Brown, you wanted to highlight the new Oversight Committee Chairman, Congressman Elijah Cummings, your colleague from Maryland.
Folks often ask me, who are your role models, your mentors, and you can go through history and identify a lot of people, but mine is Elijah Cummings. I've admired him since his days in the Maryland General Assembly. I was in the General Assembly, and now his his work in Congress. I don't know of any member of Congress who both has a command of the work in Congress and a connection to his community.
Yes.
And he does both very well, and he's certainly someone who I aspire to be like in my days in Congress.
Well, you know,
Good
and
choice.
we were talking about deals before. I worked with Elijah. He was a ranking member, when I was chairman of a committee that was trying to provide long-term care to federal employees. He had a more free market approach, and his approach was different. But we just sat down and figured it out. We got everybody out of the room, sat down, figured out how to do it. And what I loved about Elijah was his word was gold.
Oh, absolutely.
Elijah told me something, I could take it back to my caucus, I could take it back to the leadership, and I'd say, this is going to happen.
He's
Drawing a distinction there?
Yes, just a slight one.
Well, and that is
Perhaps.
that is the problem with dealing with Donald Trump. Again, well, I could give you 5 examples just on this border wall where
Ceilings might be painted gold.
where his words
But his
are
words not gold.
You know, his words aren't worth anything in negotiations.
And look, Elijah is going to present an opportunity for, if the president truly wants to be bipartisan, his prescription drug bill that Elijah has in to make prescription drugs more affordable. Words may be used today about comedy and bipartisanship tonight, but let's see if the president can put those words into action around Elijah's prescription drug bill.
Elijah has a history of bringing people together.
Yes, he
What
does.
did you say?
Very good at it.
He sure does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good
Willie.
at it.
Congressman Anthony Brown, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Ruth Marcus, thank you as well.
Thank you, Ruth.
Up
Come
next,
back.
much more on the political